You can start, Denise, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. We have a large number of precautions to ensure there are no technical issues. Please turn off your video except when you are talking. The Zoom host has muted everyone, and instructions about unmuting yourselves will be provided later by the speakers. We are pleased that you have chosen to join the Greater Lansing United Nations Association and Zonta District 15 in recognition of International Women's Day. We also appreciate the sponsorship of this webinar by the Michigan State University Center for Gender and Global Context. International Women's Day is officially recognized by both the UN and Zonta International as an annual opportunity to celebrate the achievements of women and to also acknowledge the social and political challenges faced by women worldwide. My name is Denise Quarles. I will serve as the moderator. I am a member of the board of the Greater Lansing United Nations Association, which I will refer to as GLUNA. I have also been a member of Zonta for 25 years and served in various elected positions, such as District 15 Governor and International Director. GLUNA is one of 200 community and university chapters in the United States. The mission of the UN Association USA is to, through education and advocacy, inspire and mobilize the community to support the work of the UN and its agencies. The UN has a robust agenda to improve the lives of the world's population and the health of our planet by 2030. It is an agenda reflected in 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by UN member nations in 2015. You can see that the goals address numerous critically important issues such as poverty, hunger, health, education, gender equality, etc. Achieving these Sustainable Development Goals is not only the responsibility of member nations of the UN, non-governmental organizations, also known as NGOs, companies, and individuals can all contribute to the achievement of these goals by 2030. Both GLUNA and Zonta International are supportive of the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals. The presentation tonight about the impact of climate change on women is applicable to goals number 5, gender equality, and number 13, climate action. Tassin, if you could turn to that, thank you. The Greater Lansing UN Association and Zonta District 15 have a great collaborative relationship working together to share information of mutual interest with the public, as well as our respective memberships, as is being done tonight. I think most of our attendees are probably from Zonta, but we do have, like I said, a mixture of both GLUNA members and the public. I would now like to introduce the governor of Zonta International District 15, who will share information with you about Zonta. As a 12-year member of the Zonta Club of Roscommon County in District 15, Governor Sherry Johnson has served in a variety of roles in the club, including secretary, board member, vice president, and president. She has also served as parliamentarian for District 15 and is the current district governor. Sherry works as the CEO of MMI, a large nonprofit agency in Mount Pleasant, serving people with disabilities. In addition to her employment with Zonta, Sherry is involved in other statewide and national advocacy activities in support of assuring inclusive opportunities for all. Sherry?
Thanks, Denise. I'm really happy to be here today. Zonta District 15 is really proud to partner with organizations and coalitions who share Zonta International's vision of a world in which women's rights are recognized as human rights and every woman is able to achieve her full potential. By partnering with like-minded organizations like GLUNA, we can extend our reach and impact to empower more women and girls around the world to realize their rights. The consequences of climate change are severe, especially for poor and vulnerable groups in developing countries. From natural disasters to food security, health, access to clean water, and migration, in several parts of the world, our changing climate has already had severe implications for women and girls. As families strive to cope with these changes, they may resort to negative coping mechanisms, forcing girls to leave school or marry early. Risk for gender-based violence also increases. Understanding climate change as a human rights issue is central to the fight against climate change, but also to create a sustainable, gender-equal future. Surveys have found that women's concerns about climate change are greater than men's, even in parts of the world where the consequences of climate change are not already impacting their lifestyles. Women have diverse experiences about how to best adapt to climate change and how to most effectively control it. If properly involved, women and girls can set and promote climate-friendly lifestyles. They can become change agents and effective leaders in mitigating the risks of climate change. Zonta International asks our members, and I am therefore going to ask you as well, once you've heard tonight's presentation and you wonder what are my next steps, here are some things to consider. Include gendered climate change advocacy actions in the advocacy plans of your organization. Support the inclusion of women at the national and local tables of decision makers on environmental sustainability. Promote girls' education and the inclusion of climate literacy in schools to increase gendered scientific and technical contributions to climate change mitigation. And last but not least, advocate for national policies that take into account women's economic opportunities and ensures their full and equal participation in the economy. Looking forward to hearing more from the presenters tonight, and thanks to GLUNA for the partnership.
Thank you, Sherry. Our speakers tonight, Julie Trone and Angela Broekman, will provide an interactive presentation, including recommendations for advocacy action that can be applied to other organizations and individuals other than Zontans. They will give you instructions on how you can participate in those interactive and Q&A part. Julie is a former educator and wellness professional who is serving her second year as club president of the Zonta Club of Fort Collins. She also serves as chairperson of the District 12 Action for Environment and Gender Equality Committee, co-chair of the Zonta International USA Caucus Subcommittee on Gender Equality and Climate Change, and a member of the International Zonta Says Now work group. Angela has been a Zontian since 2000. She retired from the military as well as the VA, specializing in adult education. Angela has an MBA in organizational effectiveness. She taught command and general staff college for the U.S. Army for 10 years. And currently she is the chairperson of Climate Committee for the Zonta International USA Caucus. And she sits on the International Zonta Says Now work group and is the Area 2 Director in District 5. Angela and Julie.
Thank you, Denise. Julie, can we have our slide, please? Next slide. Welcome, Zonchans and all others like-minded groups who are here with us tonight. Julie and I will join you as we learn more about how to respond to gender equal climate action. Next slide, please. We're going to be looking at how the United Nations, UN Women, and the U.S. Caucus on the UN NGO and the Commission on the Status of Women have paved the way for Zonta USA to take action. Julie?
In 2021, well, hello, everyone. I don't want to just jump right in. Let me just say hello. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you being here today and listening. Thank you to Denise and Sherry for such a great talk about what you're going to hear from us today, but also what is important with GLUNA and in District 5. So thank you both. In 2021, the U.S. Women's Caucus at the United Nations Organization worked on how climate change affects women and girls. And they found 7 specific recommendations that cause girls and women to be further vulnerable in their homes and their communities. The 7 that you see on the slide are those 7, and they are aligned with the sustainability goals, which we're going to go to next. So these are the 17 sustainability goals that Denise talked about earlier, and gender equality number 5. And what was the other one that she had?
13.
13, protect the planet. Those are 2 important ones that stand out for us today. But if you look at all the others, they all are impacted by the work we do with gender equality and protecting the planet. So they're all interconnected. We think that this is a great framework for you if you are to create your advocacy plan. Take one of these 17 goals. Doesn't have to be 5 or 13. Take one of them and look at it. Gather facts. For instance, clean energy, which is protecting the planet. Gather some facts. Be a leader in the solutions, or listen to leaders who are solving the problems. Use your voice to educate others or to raise an alarm about a situation and offer solutions or where people can go for solutions. Advocate with leaders and decision makers to solve problems and to make sure women and girls are part of the decision-making process. How does it impact them? And collaborate with your community to improve the lives of everyone. That's just an example. I'm going to throw it over to Angela.
And here are some ideas why we need to advocate for gender equal climate action. I hope everyone can read those slides. Next slide, please. This is what we do as Zonchans in our clubs, in our communities, within our states, within the nation, and around the globe. We are committed to improving the lives of women through service and advocacy. Please keep this in mind as we move through our presentation. Next slide, please. Let's briefly look at climate change in a way that may be a little new to you. Next slide. There are 2 basic types of climate change: the acute, which means a sudden change, or chronic and slow onset. They are both present, but affect all the regions around the U.S. very differently. Next slide, please. Here are some of the acute climate action activities that we have learned to experience. And we'll realize that at one point in time, we used to talk about the 100-year flood, or it's been 100 years since the blizzards. And that's not the reality of our lives anymore. Tornado season used to be from April to September. I'm originally from Kansas. I grew up in tornado season. Now tornadoes are year-round. So As we deal with this, we realize that the frequency and the severity has surpassed even what we could have imagined. So our seasons are now becoming consistent weather events. The seasons have all lengthened. Wildfires now occur year-round, for example. We're having blizzards in Los Angeles. Floods are washing away our rich topsoil and farmlands more frequently. Consider this. When there is a weather disaster, FEMA offers help. They are not providing funds to replace everything lost. Today, many insurance companies have stopped offering insurance in certain parts of our country that are prone to hurricanes and flooding. 4 months ago, I was in North Carolina, and there was a nice article about women or families that have been living and are still residing in hotel rooms 3 years after the hurricane came through in North Carolina. Another problem is the frequency. In 2022, the South experienced monthly damaging tornadoes from September through December. We can now expect more and more of these sudden disasters from now on, and they will worsen if we don't start taking action now. A little more data for you. In 1980, hurricanes of 1 billion with a B damage, there were 8. In the year 2000, there were 4. Last year, we had 7 hurricanes that did over $1 billion in damage. In 1980, the earthquakes that we experienced in North America was 341. In 2000, that number has grown to 1,344. And in 2022, we had 2,342 earthquakes. Tornadoes, we had 80 in 1980, we had 866. In the year 2000, we had 1,075. Last year, we matched the year with 2,022 tornadoes. As you can see, they are expanding, and we are seeing more and more of this activity. Next slide, please. Here and globally, food production is at the mercy of acute and chronic climate change. Water is also heavily affected. Floods pollute freshwater sources. Drought takes the sources away. And in our largest underground water aquifer, the Agolia, which is in the Midwest, 40% has already been deleted due to agricultural use. Scientists predict that it will be nearly dry in the year 2050. And once it dries, hey folks, it only takes 6,000 years to refill it. We may not understand permafrost thawing, but some may not care. But however, when it thaws, it changes our landscape, and it also releases all the stored greenhouse gases which were in place when it froze. Heat waves are lasting longer than ever before, and heat is a threat to all living things. The rising sea level affects millions of people living near the shore while they are dealing with shoreline erosion. And with shoreline erosion comes mudslides which endanger the lives and homes. One of the other things we're dealing with is the shifting of the growing season. In 1980, the growing season for our crops was 93 days. Last year, it had expanded by 26 days. Our growing season is now 119 days. Wine is now a booming industry in Washington state. And did you know that Georgia is now the leading producer of oranges? Next slide, please.
Okay, I'm going to take over. Thanks, Angela. So acute and chronic climate change is in our everyday lives. I think Angela explained that quite well. Here's where it gets a little scarier, I hate to say, but it's something to inspire action. All of those changes disrupt our fresh food and water availability. They reduce access to food and water And it is not just people of low income living in food deserts. It is everyone. And you'll see it on your grocery store shelves. It also affects the food and water quality. Angela talked about that water quality earlier. Water is either drying up or it's becoming polluted because of flooding. Either way, you end up with affecting the quality, which means there's less water. So conservation is the key. And all of these climate disasters cause displacement. And that is what we're going to talk about next, displacement. And we think of migration in other parts of the world, women and children from Ukraine going to Poland as a result of the crisis over there, and families having to leave in Pakistan because of the flooding last spring. Well, displacement happens here too. A year from this past December, 2,500 families were displaced in Boulder in a single day, many of them with only a few minutes notice, and they were working or at school. They could not go grab their things. Displacement sets the stage for a lot of the things that we Zontians are trying to stop, and it includes narrowing the gender gap. So trafficking increases, even in the United States. More attacks because of stress, more sexual assault because of stress. It interferes with our ability to generate income when our community has fallen to disaster. Interferes with education and childcare. That all interferes with our ability to live our lives healthy, happy, prosperous, and safe. It increases violence and vulnerabilities for everyone. Here's a statistic, or the UN Women actually put this together. I'm just going to point out the first one about Hurricane Katrina. Now, I know it was a few years ago. However, climate change isn't new. It's been going on, and scientists and big businesses have known about it since the 70s. Have we done much about it? Not really. Has our government done a whole lot about it? Not really. So let's look at Hurricane Katrina as a climate disaster, an acute one, and see the rate of rape, how it rose 53 times the baseline rate. This is not unusual after a climate disaster. So women are more vulnerable to health inequities caused by climate events because of all of these things you see on the slide. It's incredibly stressful to lose your home and not know where you're going to go, not be able to access money, not be able to use your phone because there's no cell tower now, or not be able to have electricity. It's incredibly, incredibly stressful, devastating. And I know many of you probably know at least one person who has been affected by a climate event. So all of this talk Angela and I have talked about creates climate anxiety. It's a thing. It's a real thing. In fact, there's climate anxiety therapy right now. You can Google it and find a climate aware therapist who can help people deal with the anxiety that comes up, even from listening to what is going on. It really throws us into denial or depression. It increases suicide. It makes us angry, worry, insecure. It causes grief and dread because we're aware of the problem. And if we're affected by the problem, it really affects our mental well-being, especially if you become homeless. It doesn't matter your status in the community. If you become homeless, it's very, very devastating. So this is a real concern. Today, if you find that you have anxiety and you're worried or afraid or insecure, or just want to put your head under the covers and not deal with it, we suggest that you look up climate anxiety, maybe talk to a friend, a therapist, someone you know, even your physician, about how you're feeling so it doesn't overtake you, because this is a big problem and we are working very hard to try to correct it as best as possible. It takes an entire village, maybe many, many villages. Let's just say a whole group of villages that cover the entire planet. All right, I'm going to throw it to Angela.
So when we talk about this and think about it, how does this help women and girls? If you would, please take a moment and put some of your ideas and answers in the chat. How does all of this connect with climate change? I'll give you an example while you're charting. One of the things we've been working on here in Louisville was trying to install solar lighting on our streetlights. And the idea of installing solar lighting was falling on deaf ears, you know. So then we approached it from another angle. We looked at the area of town that had the highest assault rate against women. And we found out that over 50% of the lighting at bus stops were out. So the team in Louisville crunched the numbers, went to the area council and showed them how if they installed solar, they could save money on their operating budget. And oh, by the way, improve safety for the women riding the buses. And that's how we took a climate approach to deal with a gender issue of assault in a local area of town. Julie, do we have any comments in the chat?
Unfortunately, I can't access the chat yet because the slideshow. So
Okay.
I will get to it.
We will come back to that. So now let's look at how gender inequalities play a role in the widening gender gap due to the consequences of a worsening climate. These are many of the gender inequalities that women face here and around the globe. As stated already, climate change worsens these inequalities, and more of those will be listed on the next page. As Zontians, we work together to close the gender gap through our programming, which is an urgent task that requires an equal focus on climate action. So when we talk about an issue that affects the equality of women, we're asking you to also consider how changing something for the climate will help. Then it's win-win for both the gender equality and our globe. Next slide, please. Not every woman or girl has the same inequalities, nor do they have the same acceptance to tolerate these inequalities. Inequalities have many facets. Some are subtle, some are passive, some are aggressive, some are manipulative, some are cultural, some are harmful, and some are just plain life-threatening. While some women accept these lives, their lives' fate, other circumstances, many women now oppose these inequalities. As Zontians, we are here to build awareness about the existence of gender inequality through advocacy, and it's necessary now more than ever before because inequalities worsen due to the climate change. Next slide, please. This is what we know. Working on gender equality also leads to improving the condition of our climate. Building a better world for women and girls leads to gender equality. Let's look at how climate change widens the gender gap and deepens inequalities. Julie, would you like to share?
I do. I will. I did learn how to do the chat. So I just want to read a couple of things. Bob said about what can we do? How does gender inequality or how working on gender equality help with climate change? What can we do? And so Bob said, prepare for more children as part of the disaster response. We agree, but you'll see a little bit more on that. Increased migration due to droughts and poor farming condition is one of the reasons why we're one of the effects of climate change.
Mhm.
On a solution is support from Kristen, support businesses that are doing green, sustainable farming and food production. That's an excellent solution. Sherry says girls are being removed from schools in parts of the world to support family stress related to climate change. It is also happening here. It is happening in the United States. Children are being married early. All of us, again, more frequently. And girls are taken out of school. There's just poverty is increasing and period poverty is increasing. So there's a lot of family stress in some communities. So it's not just out of the US. But thank you all. Here we go. The next slide. Let's talk about climate change. How, let me just, increases vulnerabilities and violence due to displacement. So what we did was we took all of those gender inequalities, the 2 slides with all the colorful gender inequalities, and we put some of the more obvious ones. There are more, but we put obvious ones because we only have so much room on our slide. So the little colored boxes are gender inequalities that widen for women and girls, but women, and also they can widen for men and boys too. Let's be honest, this happens to everyone during when you lose your home and your belongings. So the first one is displacement, as you can see. Let's see the next one. Oh, before we go to the next one, I want you to consider advocating for or creating programming in your community to teach residents how to create an evacuation plan.
Mhm.
One of our attendees talked about teaching children. The whole community needs to know how to create an evacuation plan. Zonta says now, Zonta USA Caucus Climate Change Committee, we have had a recent presentation with a lot of these same slides, but it's longer because there is an additional half an hour totally focused on how to create an evacuation plan. So I suggest that you check on our zontausa.org website and look at that because it's powerful and necessary. Okay. The next one is increases sexual assault, especially after displacement. Here are 4 gender inequalities that widen. In 2005, again, Katrina, the Gulf Coast received over 100 sexual assault related calls, 30% of them in a shelter, 38% were attackers that were strangers. 36% of the victims were between the ages of 15 and 24. This happens more and more. Our shelters are not safe for women and girls after a climate disaster. This is an advocacy issue. This is a service project to go to your local Red Cross, your local community leaders and say, this has been going on since at least 2005. If something happens in our community, we want to advocate for safety. How do we do that? Get on a panel, work with your leaders, get that moving. The next one is increases incidence of child marriage. Here are 7 of the gender inequalities that widen as a result of child marriage. Child marriage is increasing all over the world, including the United States, as a result of economic insecurity. Food and water insecurity is one of the #1 reasons to sell your child. It happens here too. Displacement is another one because, and we're going to talk about human trafficking, but that is actually tied together. These inequities impact girls under the age of 18, their physical and mental well-being. They end up in poverty most of the time. Their children who they give birth to end up in poverty most of the time. And they typically end up as single moms, and frequently there's domestic violence. So consider an advocacy campaign. in collaboration with other clubs, Zonta clubs or Rotary clubs or any kind of clubs, junior league clubs in your state, and visit or write or both to state legislators to end child marriage in your state. I'm not sure what Michigan's, if they're one of the 5, maybe there's 7 states that have ended child marriage.
No.
No, so neither has Colorado. Although Angela has told me that their state did the same thing as Colorado. She's in Kentucky, but they added you have to have emancipation rights in order to be 16 or 17. Colorado went with 16 or 17, as long as the judge thinks they can handle it, which I don't know about you or me. I know about me. I would, if I was the judge, I'd be like, no. All right, let's look at increased incidences of human trafficking. There's 5 root causes. I want to point out these root causes of human trafficking are the causes of climate disasters, homelessness, poverty, lack of access to education or jobs, temporary or permanent displacement, lack of legal protection for immigrants and for women who are not on the important papers like the deed, the bank account, the car registration. Those, if you're not on that with your spouse, whether, doesn't matter which gender your spouse is, if only one of the 2 are on the deed, the bank account, and that person doesn't survive, but you do, you have no access. So, and discrimination that increases. So consider an awareness campaign in your community or state to help end human trafficking, if you're not already doing that. Another group that you can work closely with is GLUNA. I'm sure you already do, but between GLUNA and Zonta, you have a lot of power between you. Last one before Angela starts, increases violence against women, something Zontians work very hard on. Some UN women also work very hard on this. There more than 8 gender inequalities that widen as a result of increasing domestic violence. Just to note, during the pandemic, in most communities, there weren't enough beds for the number of domestic violence cases. So imagine if you have displacement as a result of a climate disaster, your domestic violence shelter may be affected and may be destroyed. And maybe everyone ends up in the shelter, including the perpetrators and the families that were trying to escape. Plus, it increases as a result of stress. So it's very important for us all to really work with our community to make sure everyone has a safe place to go, and maybe talk to and advocate with your local domestic violence shelters to see what their evacuation plan is and bring this subject up with them. All right, back to Angela.
So let's take a look at this slide again. And I'm hoping it's making more sense to you now as to why we need gender equal climate action. Empowering women in leadership in the decision-making to receive equal economic and educational opportunities needs to be part of our advocacy actions and plans. When there is equal representation at the table, decisions to protect the planet and reduce the gender gap are more likely to occur. When only one gender makes decisions for all of us, there is less consideration for the needs of the opposite gender. Case in point, how often do men think about how do they accommodate menstrual cycles of women and girls in a crisis situation? It's not an area of concern. They don't think about how to provide those extra needed items. Next slide, please. So now we want to put you to work and have you put in the chat some of the ideas that you have for service and or advocacy for gender equal climate change that we can share with each other.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, there are districts already taking this campaign and running with it. We're going to show you some of the resources so you can learn about more of the issues and what other districts are doing as well. You want to say something, Julie?
Yeah, just really quick. I'm so sorry I stepped on your speech.
That's okay.
We got something, we have a chat from Zonta Club of Gaylord to everyone, if you haven't seen it, which is part of what you're talking about. What can we do? Says per Michigan Coalition to End Child Marriage in Michigan on March 16th, 2023 at 9 a.m. At the Michigan State Capitol Room 403, Senator Sarah Anthony will hold a press conference on the bill packages to end child marriage in Michigan. Woo! The bill packages will be enrolled on 3/15 and read and referred to committee on 3/16 around noon. The Zonta Club of Gaylord asks that you all of you in Michigan, doesn't matter if you're a Zontian or not, contact Unchained at Last to participate. Becca at unchainedatlast.org. See it in the chat. Write it down. We encourage that. All right, I'm going to show you the resources that.
And we will be sharing this resource page with you.
Yes. We have 4 resources that we're just showing you today. And there are more. There's so many resources out there. So here's what we found. I'm in District 12 and we created a resource library. What we have found through our last year and few months of work, there are so many websites out there and you don't know who's telling the truth on what. If someone's asking you to buy a t-shirt or a stuffed animal to save the planet, the t-shirt and the stuffed animal are not helping. They're not helping save the planet because that's adding plastics, clothing production and chemicals into, which add more greenhouse gases into our air and uses more petroleum-based products. So what we did was we created a resource library. It's open to anyone. Schools have used it in our great state of Colorado, and it will help you say, okay, I'm interested in this sustainability goal. What do they have on this? And you can go to the different recommendations from the U.S. Women's Caucus of the UN and see where it fits and what's going on. And that will help you build your plans. District 8 in the Pacific Northwest has some great ideas too, similar to what Zonta USA Caucus is going to do. They have created a climate pledge, and they are doing activities with climate action organizations. They're building partnerships. The USA Caucus has so many resources, our past think tanks. We highly recommend that you listen to them, especially the latest one. I don't know if it's up yet, but it should be up soon. And as soon as it is, we will let Denise Quarles and Denise Sylvester know so they can share with you all. So you can learn about evacuation plans when there's a climate disaster and how to have a to-go kit. And go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I'm going to add, our next think tank is in April 29th at noon Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking, it'll be a workshop format for how to create and what kind of projects you can create at your local area. So I hope you'll all look into it. Hope you've all signed up for your Fast Action Fridays. It is usually through the Fast Action Fridays that you will find the link to sign up for our think tanks. So I encourage you all to create some time in your lives. I know we're all extremely busy, and listen to our think tanks.
I'm just putting it in the chat.
Yay.
So this is a great one because it's a workshop on advocacy and service connected to what we're talking about today. All right, so Denise Sylvester also put in, she put in our think tank link, and she put in zontausa.org, so you can look at that. We are going to go to questions now because we really want to open it up for people to talk, to be part of the solution, to ask questions about what we've done locally. Some people say you can't do anything as an individual, but we absolutely can. One person can do something, then you tell somebody else, and now 2 people, then 4 people, then 6 people, and your club and your community, it grows. So let's get some questions. You can either put them in the chat. I'm going to stop the share so we can see you, and just raise your hand. You don't have to undo your video so we can keep our bandwidth manageable, but please go ahead and ask questions. We are also going to be at the North American Interdistrict meeting on June 30th and July 1st. On June 30th, we have a 3-hour kind of workshop presentation. And then on Saturday, we have a workshop on advocacy and service. So if you're going to the NAIDM, please stop by and see us on Friday or Saturday or both. All right, I don't see any questions yet. Dassen, if you see anyone raise their hand, please let me know. I'm going to switch to gallery view, see if I see anything. Anybody want to know about evacuation plans?
One comment I will add, when we started talking evacuation plans, it was interesting how our Center for Women and Families shared with how much of the evacuation plans we did were the same safety plans they created to help women get out of domestic violence situations. And so it was real, another intersection between violence against women and climate. How to have a go bag, how to know exactly where are your important documents. One of the suggestions was, go to Goodwill or one of your local thrift stores and pack yourself a backpack. Get a backpack and pack it with a couple of sets of clothes, some things, and then have a list. Where are your important papers? Do you have your passport, your identification? Don't forget your keys in your purse. Do you have cash on hand? If all the power's down, cash may be the only way you can get food and water or lodging.
We have a couple questions. Let's go. I'll start with the one that came in first. For Angela, how long did the solar light project take? Did you work with other coalition? How much was the cost?
I do not remember the cost. It took us about 6 months to get through that section of town. We have Louisville Action Climate Network here in town in Louisville. And we started the conversation, and then we presented a white paper to them. We had to wait for there to go through their meetings. Then they had a couple of meetings. Then they invited us in to talk to them. The bottom line, what convinced them was the cost savings on the back end. They were grateful about the initial cost, but we showed them that within about 6 months, they would then be showing profit, or not profit, but they would reduce their expenses because they would have paid off the installation of the climate or of the solar panels on the lights. And then they had to have another discussion, and then there was a vote, and then they put it in action. So anytime you're working with legislative changes and budget cycles, it does take a while.
That's a great answer. All right, the next one from Kristen. What can small clubs do to start some work on climate change? She adds, would it be helpful to hold an information session like this and invite organizations who help women in abuse situations? I'll answer the second question. Yes, it would be helpful to have. You can even do a live Facebook event, something like that, if you want to do something to reach more people and it costs less, a Zoom event. What can some small clubs do? Similar to what Angela's club did with the lights. We actually have encouraged people to create circles of friends, circles where you can talk about it. Doesn't matter what side of the coin you're on, but a safe place for everyone to express themselves. And what they've found is that those circles actually start to make people think of doing actionable items. So if your community has farmland, here's an example, farmland that is no longer used. I just heard a great story on NPR that talked about they planted trees and they restored wetlands on farmland that was no longer being used. So now they have more natural area, indigenous plantings, more just the soil recuperates, and the animals and wildlife, local wildlife actually benefit as well. And it creates shade, which creates cooling of the planet. District 8 actually worked with a tree planting group recently as well. So you can actually do something like that. Cleaning water. Actually, there was a Zontian in District 12 years ago, in I think the Pikes Peak Club, and she found that there was the PFOs, which is a terrible chemical that was leaching into the reservoir water. And so their club got active in advocating with state legislators and had a bill passed that the Air Force Academy was no longer allowed to use firefighting foam to clean or to put out the fires in the engines of the jets that were on the other side of the reservoir, because it was polluting the water, which is polluting every community's, every community around there was drinking that water. So those are a couple ideas. All right. So Angela, I'm going to throw this to you. Sherry says, I would love to know more about evacuation plans and how we can have a proactive impact in working with local authorities.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful idea. I know locally, one of the things when I brought it up to our club is people started questioning, where would you go for an evacuation? Because many of us are very comfortable in our ideas of where we are and where we're safe. But if you had to leave, we don't really know where we would be going and what would we be taking. Do we need to plan, for how many days? Well, with the acute onset weather, you usually get notice, the blizzards are coming, a tornado's coming, you have flood warnings, and most folks know if they live in those plains, in those areas where they will be affected. But how do you get out? Do you have gas in your car to leave if you can leave with your car? It's an ongoing challenge that we all have to look at and consider, where is our safe spot? I know we used to practice when my children were at home, the drill of if the fire burnt down and you were getting out of the house, where's the safety area we're meeting for where we're going next? It's the same type thing. Do you have a plan? And it's not until you truly start looking at your plan do you start identifying your own gaps and what you need and where you can go. If you're evacuating because of fire, what's your evacuation route? In the eastern side of the country, where we have so many hurricanes, all of their evacuation routes are very effectively marked. And they usually start evacuating sometimes 48 hours before the event. Tornadoes, it's usually cover in place. Do you have a radio that you can get through? Pack a whistle, because if the house collapses around you, you may be in a safe space, but if you can blow a whistle, chances are you'll be heard so they can get you out. So those are some of the things that when we start talking about what is an evacuation plan, where do you go? How do you prepare, knowing that you're going to have to carry everything that you're taking with you, and what has the best impact for your survival and your safety?
I'd like to add that, and this is building on what Angela just said about carrying with you. Many of us, women especially, are tasked with taking care of the children, the elderly parents, the pets, and then sometimes there's medical equipment, immobility with certain, whether you have someone with a disability or not. So it's important to look at your personal situation, but to do something as a Zonta club, create a shell of an evacuation plan list, and then add, by going to Red Cross and local Red Cross and your local community leaders, like, what is our evacuation route in case of a wildfire, tornado, a hurricane, whatever. And then add that in there, not a link, but add the directions, like almost like a little brochure or a little packet that you can offer to the community. Maybe you're going to have a Zonta table at an event, and you can have these packets available for people to take, or you can have them spread out so they can take pictures of them if that's paperless. And that way they can do that on their own. What's important is to know how to go. Do you have a to-go bag? What to put in it? What if you only have 15 minutes? What would you put in it if you only get a 15-minute notice? What would you put in it if you get an hour notice or a half a day notice? Those kind of things. Things that run on batteries like radios, and I don't know if cell phones do, but cell phones are questionable in some disasters. So especially when you have to use a charger. So what kind of things can you do to try to stay connected and be able to purchase food? Food and water is critical too, to have at least a day to 3 days worth of water. What if you have to take the children 3 days worth of water, all that food, and then you can't drive your car? You really it really takes a lot of thought, but you can do it, and you can do a basic evacuation plan. In Florida, they do that in the newspaper during the hurricane season. They publish an evacuation plan and the list of things to take. All right, I'm not going to go further.
I'm going to add to that, Julie. Write down on paper your contact information. Who are your important people? Because if you have a major tornado come through, you're not going to have cell power. The towers will be down. There won't be any power. So now you're down to paper and pencil. And I'll admit it, I have gotten so reliant on my phone, knowing what phone number to dial for my daughter, that those numbers don't pop in my head like they used to. Also, do a paper list of your medication. I know a lot of people tell me, oh, I've got that on my phone. If your phone is dead or you can't get to access anything, it doesn't do you any good there.
That's true. And maps and addresses, because you may not have access to GPS. So anyway, it's a big list. I hope you're writing notes. Can always ask, and it is a recording, so you can always listen again. All right, so the next one, Kristen, what are some good ways to introduce this to schools? I was giving some thought to that, and there are some interesting things you can do. Building curriculum is not always easy, but some interesting things. You can maybe read a climate action book to the classrooms. The libraries might be willing to do something special on Girls' Day or Earth Week, and have all the climate related books they can get, and maybe even have an author's event of a climate related book, or a movie or assembly for the whole school. Those are some of the ways to introduce. Go to the school board and see if they have a climate action committee on the district, like a district task force, and see if there's any way that someone in Zonta or Galuna can be part of that, or at least speak to that, or speak to the school board about the essentials for what happens. You can ask them those questions. What happens in an emergency? What is your evacuation plan? What are we doing in the schools to make sure children know? What are your schools doing to be more conscious of climate change? Some schools, in fact, in Fort Collins, where I live, Fort Collins, Colorado, there's a big push to put solar panels on top of the schools. If all of the buildings had solar panels, they would reduce the amount of energy by a lot. So, there's a few other things, and you can look for books, movies, children's books on our District 12 website under advocacy. Zonta says now. All right, Dana says, I live in a very small town north of Lansing. The last tornado was probably over a decade ago, but still happened. Should small rural places create an evacuation plan, or are they usually okay due to the number of people? Should I stay or should I go is really what I'm hearing here. And there's a couple things. In rural communities, they should definitely have an evacuation plan. Wouldn't you agree, Angela?
Absolutely. I lived out in the country and, a lot of times, we had a special radio to give us weather alerts because we were so far out. We didn't have the sirens that you hear when you live in the city. It's like anything else. You have to have a plan in your head so you can execute. Like they say, plan your work and work your plan. Plan your evacuation and pray you never need it. But if you do, know it, because that may be the point that saves your life.
Now to stay, if you're going to stay, it's really great if you have some sort of a tornado shelter underground. Also, if you have someone with a disability, maybe in a wheelchair or a walker or bedridden, how are you going to save that person's? Those are some of the questions, even in rural communities, of whether you should stay or go, and really look at the rural community and see how are they going to communicate. Does everyone have a crank radio that so your neighbors that are maybe a mile away or so can talk to, so you can talk to each other? That would be something to look at and maybe advocate for, is a rural community evacuation plan and a stay in place plan. And also talking to the Red Cross and seeing what will they do in case of an emergency in a rural area. It would be nice for all of you in that to know that. All right. Sherry says, I appreciate the information and ideas. I hear many useful ideas, but I'm also struck by how your family income and resources create a divide in managing the impact of climate change. Yes, they absolutely do create a divide. Angela, what do you have any thoughts on this?
Wow, that is a hard one, because when your resources are already stretched to the max, it's hard to think, now, how do I come up with having a stash of $50 when I'm living paycheck to paycheck, trying to put food on the table? As bad as this sounds, payday candy bars are fairly nutritious. They last a long time. And if you can keep them away from the kids, that's a pretty fast food. Part of the problem with your food is you need calorie dense so that it can sustain you. And sugar doesn't do that. You're going to need something that has a lot of protein base in it. Working together especially in some of the smaller communities where you can actually share the resources. I know Julie was sharing with me a community that is now making reusable paper towels. So we're going to explore about how to do that. Those are things that if you do reusable paper towels, you're helping the climate by reducing it. And you're also helping your wallet because you're not repurchasing. The more single-use items that you can take out of your budget and figure out ways in which to incorporate a reusable process, it helps with the finances and it helps with the climate. That's a good question, and we'll have to carry that forward to do some more work on it for us.
Yes, family income and resources definitely create a divide. Expectations of what is the woman's role versus the male role, or if it's gender, same gender, whose role is what. Those are talking points. And we have Zontian in our group that she talks about how women can whoever is, say you're a woman who stays at home and doesn't have an income, or you're retired on a fixed income, how do you manage what Angela was saying, how do you manage if the emergency happens or disaster happens, and putting your name, make sure you have equal billing with, family income, equal billing with resources. So that one half of the family is not able and the other half of the family is struggling during a disaster. So for instance, know where everyone is going in a disaster, or for climate change in general. It's important that families have a plan for who does what but not putting it all on one person's shoulders because one person is working more than the other person. So the dynamic is intricate and it's a tough one to navigate, but yeah, we're going to dive more into that to help answer that question a little bit more better, a little better. All right, Bob has a question. Perhaps we have a responsibility to advocate within our community, state, and nation for adequate and timely relief resources to be available for those who are low income. Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful advocacy plan, something that the whole community can get involved with, and even schools can actually get involved with that. If your schools already have a plan in place, like our school district have backpacks filled with snacks for kids of low income so that they have food over the weekend and they can put their homework in there, but then there's a bunch of snacks in there, maybe a sandwich, and their one school will be open on Saturdays and Sundays for breakfast, so they can come back, they can go to that place if they can get there and have a hot meal. And so that idea can expand for climate change, is for families of low income, is a drive, a service project to make sure that they have an evacuation plan, know where to go, because maybe they're English is not their first language, so they know where to go and in their native language, and they know how to get food, or maybe the food drive can help them store this for that particular incident. So that's just off the top of my head. Relief resources. Bob, you've got me onto something. I'm going to work on that here in District 12. Any other questions? We talked a lot about disasters and displacement, but there's more to climate change than that. The truth of the matter is greenhouse gas emissions is the reason why we're where we are on this planet. It's everywhere. It looks different, just like gender inequality looks different to different women. Climate change looks different to all of us, depending on where our community is located. The southern hemisphere of the globe is reaping more climate disasters than the northern hemisphere at this point. But what we do here in the northern hemisphere affects what they do there. One of the reasons why we have climate shifts and crazy climate disasters and blizzards in LA, and the greenhouse gas emissions are causing warming, and they're warming the polar caps. So the North Pole warms, the Arctic warms, and then the jet stream goes like this, and it goes deeper down into the United States, causing more storms, more cold, and just more
Blizzards in LA.
Yeah, like LA, yeah. So think about what you can do in your community to improve energy usage, air quality. You can advocate for air quality, water quality. I have started my own personal campaign. When I start reading about mining for minerals for our phones or any other issue, and I don't see what is I don't read anything about how it affects women and girls. I've been doing writing campaigns to editors about, you've missed a point here, and it's really important to share this point when you're talking about this particular subject, because it's getting worse and widening the gender gap, and climate change is making it worse. So that's another thing you can do as a club or as an individual. All right. We could use another question. Angela, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to key on one of the conversations I've been having with the Office for Women as we include in their gender inequality sessions is solar on schools makes the air much cleaner, and asthma is one of the leading causes of children missing school. So if we change the way we heat and cool, excuse me, to a solar base, then we are improving the air quality and we are reducing sick days. So again, once you start really looking and diving down in it, you can see a lot of opportunity to weave these issues together so we have a better outcome for all.
Yes, I love that. So there's a framework to use to begin to work on your advocacy plans. Starts with gathering facts that are true and valid and science-based, because if they haven't been researched and it's just what someone heard, then we don't know if it's true or not. But if it's research-based, especially over a period of time and there's data, then most of the time you can count on it being true. So gather your facts, listen to experts, talk to leaders, and then use your voice. After you can make a plan and use your voice to advocate your plan and collaborate with other people, whether it's leaders, legislators, other clubs, your whole community, part of your community, your church, anywhere you can be heard. We suggest that women and girls elevate themselves and use their voice on one aspect. Just start with one of climate change, because now we know that every single one of those 17 sustainability goals for a cleaner and safer planet can be used as a platform for your local area. For instance, or the 7 recommendations from the U.S. Women's Caucus at the UN. One of them is agriculture. And agriculture has gotten a lot of attention. I know there's some rural communities in Michigan. We have them all over the United States. And we did touch base on how climate disasters can sweep away your topsoil. They can ruin your harvest. They can also make food availability less. So what I'm trying to get to is there are new agricultural techniques that are being touted as a way to improve the planet, create more food, and create more cooling of the earth. One of them is called regenerative farming. So on, I'm gonna talk about the District 12 website again under educational resources. We have movies, and we love the movie Kiss the Ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it really talks about agriculture. So it inspires us to, and it does talk about how women are affected and nutrition, and also 35+% of farmers our farm workers are women. So we want to protect them too. So we suggest watching Kiss the Ground with a group and seeing if it sparks any inspiration. There are many great movies out there and books to help spark. Anybody?
Okay, Julie and Angela, I don't know if there are any other questions you need to answer in the chat, or okay. But thank you very much for your very informative presentation. And we also had some good ideas from the audience and things that all of you can follow up on. As was indicated, this is not just something related to Zonta, but no matter where you live and what organizations you're part of, you can do something to respond to the inequities for women as a result of climate change, and to help your community in general. I really appreciate having worked with District 15 Governor Sherry Johnson on this project. And I would also like to thank former District 15 Governor Anna Sylvester and her daughter Denise Sylvester for playing a crucial role in helping to plan this webinar. Anna currently is the president of the Zonta Club of Roscommon, and the District 15 Young Women in Public Affairs Committee Chairperson. Denise Sylvester is the District 15 Advocacy Committee Co-Chairperson and the district's representative for the Zonta International USA Caucus. Tassin, if you'd show our last slide. On behalf of the GLUNA board, I encourage everyone to participate in future GLUNA webinars, and we cover any number of issues with our speakers related to the UN, to the Sustainable Development Goals. Very interesting, giving both a global perspective as well as this perspective on the things going on in the United States. I also hope you will visit the GLUNA and Zonta websites and consider membership. Both of our organizations have a lot of mutual interest, and there are a number of things that can be done by a lot of by people, whether they're a member or not. But being a member of these organizations, we can have some really concrete improvements in the life of the population and in changing and improving the planet. So I hope you will again go to these websites, consider membership, and consider coming to future GLUNA webinars. Also, I had mentioned earlier about GLUNA being one of 200 community and university United Nations Association chapters, and you will find a lot of interesting things looking for the United Nations Association of the United States of America, and find out what's going on in your particular area, because I know we have a number of people who are not from Michigan as part of the audience today, so please consider doing so. Have a good evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.